The Wasteland is a brutal, unforgiving place, but across its landscape, factions and societies rise from the ashes to give their people the chance for something more. So what is the standard of living like in these factions, and who has the best one? The NCR is a democratic republic comprised of 5 post-war states that emerged in the post-apocalyptic wasteland of California. By the year of 2241, the NCR had a recorded 700,000 population, which can be imagined to have reached the millions by the time of their last appearance in 2281. These millions of Republicans live lives at a standard relatively unknown to most Wastelanders, as a republic seeks to embody the pre-war values of the original United States in the modern age. For example, NCR citizens have access to a range of opportunities unique to the republic. However, there's always another side of the coin for each opportunity. Since it's a democracy, they can vote for their own elected representative in Congress. Positions such as mayors, senators, congressmen, and even a president are evident in the NCR's government. However, complaints are made that the government is corrupt and inefficient. Elected officials seek to further their own gains rather than represent the people, and are easily bribed by powerful corporations. Some argue that once Aradesh and Tandy, the original founding presidents of the NCR, had passed, and real democracy could be attempted, the problems of the NCR were laid bare. The NCR possesses an incredibly robust economy, ranging from agriculture, industry, armaments, and scientific endeavours. Work is evidently widely available to NCR citizens, with opportunities abounding across the Republic. However, they do bemoan that they're paid only in NCR Republic dollars, which are backed with nothing but the government's word rather than in caps, which are backed by water. Others state that the capitalistic nature of the NCR gives rise to powerful companies such as the Crimson Caravan, Gunrunners, or Brahmin Barons, who use their immense economical might to undercut employees and eliminate competition ruthlessly with no form of government regulation. Their military might enables them to protect their territory and interests, providing a level of protection that rivals nearly all other factions. However, this military might is born out of conscription, with the young and poor bearing the weight of the government's wars. Chief Hanlon estimates that at least 1,000 troopers die per year in the Mojave alone, as a result of troops often only being given 2 weeks training, a service rifle, and then being sent out into the field. The NCR is probably one of the best factions to live in, and arguably has the highest average standard of living, especially when you spread it amongst the people that make up its nation. However, the standard of living itself can depend on many factors, and particularly where in the NCR you're born, and who in the NCR you're born to. Location-wise, this could be looked at in 3 separate groups. You have your high standard of living regions, which would consist of the cities such as Vault City, the Hub, Boneyard, and the capital Shady Sands. Here, the streets are clean, power flows in plentiful supply, food and water is readily available, children are able to attend school, play, and essentially just be children, without the threat of starvation or violence. In cities such as the Boneyard, higher education is even able to be pursued at universities. Standards of living are still good the further out you go from the core region. Cities such as Junktown, New Reno, or Redding could fall under this category. The benefits of living within the NCR are still evident, such as rule of law, fresh food and water, as well as greater opportunities, especially compared to other Wastelanders. However, these might not be seen so much in practice. For example, Stella refers to New Reno as being akin to New Vegas, but without a Mr. House type to keep the peace. Instead, crime families such as the Wrights or Van Graffs maintain their own sense of order. Other towns such as Redding provide residents with good standards of living, but have little in the way of social services in the bad times. O'Hanrahan explained that he only joined the army since his family's farm had bad harvests and were no longer able to sustain an extra mouth to feed. However, once you get into the frontiers of NCR society, the standard of living drops significantly. This typically tends to be due to these settlements being recently built or recently incorporated into the NCR. A flag with a 2-headed bear on it does not immediately raise the standard of living. Laws that the Republic pride themselves on tend to go out the window. For example, some NCR military tend to take the law into their own hands and simply murder criminals rather than arrest them. Other laws, such as the Republic's anti-discrimination laws, tend to be forgotten. Mutant and ghoul protection is non-existent. Gender equality tends to take a backseat, and homophobia is far more prevalent. The towns themselves also may be nothing more than a few shanties. Chief Hanlon talks about a group that had occupied a well deep in Baja and began to shoot any other Wastelanders for encroaching onto NCR territory. despite the fact it was the only well within hundreds of kilometres. Basically, the NCR does have a high standard of living, especially when it's compared to vast majority of wasteland societies. However, there's a noticeable decline in the standard the further out from the capital that a person travels. And as an expansionist nation seeking to push its borders outward, this lower standard of living is often the first contact that Wastelanders have with the NCR, leading to them to distrust the group as imperious overlords with little care for the common people. The Brotherhood of Steel were founded as a military order by their founder Roger Maxson, and modelled on the knights and scribes of old that protected Western civilization after the fall of Rome. In the modern age, their key goal is the securement of dangerous and advanced technology to prevent the chance of another apocalypse. Due to the multitude of roles and ranks within their organisation, the standard of living in this group can differ based on who you are and where you are in the faction. For example, the Mojave Wasteland chapter are under a strict lockdown after losing nearly half of their manpower in the war against the NCR. The remnants are stuck underground in subterranean bunkers, with the only way to pass the time being training simulations, or the rare excursion above ground. The Mojave chapter are traumatised from their losses, divided on the mission, but ultimately, the biggest problem is they're bored out of their minds. Contrast to this would be the East Coast chapter under Arthur Maxson. 10 years prior, the East Coast were not in a favourable situation. They experienced a civil war, were cut off from the main organisation, and were isolated in the ruins of DC. However, by the time of Fallout 4, they've reached the zenith of their power. Their numbers are heavily bolstered from recruitment of locals, they control more land and resources than any other Brotherhood faction, and project more power than most other groups via the usage of their mobile fortress, the Pridwin. In general, Brotherhood members do have a better quality of life than the average Wastelander. They are given better quality food and water, medical care, training, and education to enable them to complete their mission. On the East Coast, children are seen being trained as squires, and although no doubt are indoctrinated in Brotherhood of Steel ideology, there are far more opportunities than many other children would. Paladin Dance, although probably having fabricated memories as a synth, explains that when he was just a scavenger in Washington DC, his life felt like it had no purpose. However, being recruited into the Brotherhood gave him a sense of being and belonging, and a mission to accomplish within his life. Obviously, given that the faction is purely militaristic, the sense of freedom of other factions is not as prevalent. Soldiers are required to obey their chain of command to the letter, with insubordination punished harshly. This is to the point that members are expected to be fined murdering an individual in their group who they had known their entire life, as is the case for Paladin Dance, if declared persona non grata by the Brotherhood. Their personal lives are also somewhat intruded on. Veronica claims that she had been in love with a woman once. However, given that the Brotherhood chapter she adhered to did not recruit outsiders, members were expected to remain in heterosexual couples to breed more soldiers for the Brotherhood. As such, her relationship with her lover was forbidden, and the two were forced apart from one another. When characters refer to New Vegas, this is technically in relation to the New Vegas Strip itself. However, for this analysis, we'll be looking at New Vegas as encompassing the entire pre-war Las Vegas region, such as Freeside, Westside, and other settlements. New Vegas itself can be best summarized by Veronica.
Yep, it's your typical city layout. Rich people in a gated community surrounded by extreme poverty. House gave the area around the Strip to the locals, but he has no interest in it, so he ignores it entirely.
Within the fortified gates and past the armoured rocket-toting Securitrons lies one of the crowning jewels of the post-war world. Here, people can experience lives on standards beyond access to even some pre-war civilians. 3 casinos cater to their individual needs. The Ultralux for those who wish to experience the finest foods, salt-infused pools, luxurious rooms, and refined service. The Tops for live shows, fine drinks, and swingin' vibes, and Gomorrah for those who wish to get a bit freaky. The Strip is one of the safest and most glamorous locations remaining in the world. However, it's only really available to tourists and visitors. For the New Vegas residents who live on the Strip, but not in one of the casinos, life is pretty good but not perfect. Mr. House runs the Strip purely as his own money-making endeavour, and has no interest whatsoever in the livelihoods of his people. Vendors are permitted to work on the Strip, selling food and non-alcoholic drinks. However, they have to forfeit 50% of their profits to House at the end of each day. The residents of the Vault on the Strip were forcibly evicted from their home, with the lower levels filled with concrete. It was only with the intervention of Sarah that had Mr. House agreed to leave it in exchange for it to be run as a hotel, as another money-making enterprise for him. Outside the strip itself, Freeside is the next region that encompasses the former area of Fremont Street. And once outside the walls of the strip, quality of life drops dramatically. As explained by the King,
To understand Freeside, you have to look back a few years. Originally, we were all just tribes making a living in this area. That all changed when Mr. House came around. He made an offer to the 3 biggest tribes that were willing to listen to him. Today, everyone calls those tribes the 3 families, and they live in luxury and run their own casinos in the Strip. The rest of us were left to fight over the crumbs, living in the shadow of those more fortunate.
in Freeside, vagrants harass residents and visitors, with the wealthy hiring protection to move through the streets and the unfortunate being murdered in the alleys. Every manner of addict can be found wallowing in the streets, starving children, chase down giant rats and gnaw on their raw meat. The Kings keep a foundation of order within the area, but the only protection a person really has is from the barrel of their own gun. Freeside does experience the benefits of protection from the wasteland. People are able to make homes in somewhat formidable pre-war structures and are safe from rogue attacks from wasteland creatures or hostile groups such as the Fiends. However, they also have to contend with their neighbours, some of whom can be just as dangerous. Outside of this immediate area, Westside is another Mojave community that displays quality of life for local residents. Having never been formal tribals, Westside is a settlement that has always staunchly supported its own independence. And although it does appear poor and run down, the community produces enough food, weapons and medicine to encourage trade and arm their defences. A cooperative garden allows them to cultivate enough food to survive and barter for other items, a local militia force protects them from internal and external threats, and the nearby gladiator pits of the Thorn provide their own form of tourism to help boost their economy. Their biggest threat is an existential one, as they fear being forcibly absorbed into the NCR and losing their independent status. Hidden beneath the ruins of the Commonwealth Institute of Technology, the Institute is a secretive, technologically advanced faction located in the ruins of Boston. Surface dwellers speak of the group in whispers, as they live in fear of the Institute and their humanoid synths. Everyone knows someone whose loved one was snatched in the middle of the night by the group, or have heard stories of settlers being replaced with exact synthetic replicas to spy on their friends and neighbours. As a result, the Institute has a sinister reputation from the world above, imagining an evil cabal of sociopaths lurking in the shadows. Although it does have some truth to it, it's also not the whole truth. The Institute is made up of scientists, each assigned to their own specific division. And although their motives are a bit cruel, the people themselves are quite benign. The standard of living within the Institute is definitely the best that can be found anywhere in the known post-war world, and honestly, above and beyond what most pro-war people had access to as well. The Institute itself is located safe underground, with very little threat to its residents from the troubles of the world above. All the nightmares that Wastelanders deal with, raiders, ghouls, supermins, are a complete non-entity to the Institute. The scientists and their families live in clean, sterile apartments decked out with modern amenities, running purified water for hot showers, sinks and toilets, comfortable beds, private and spacious apartments, activities for leisure, healthy clean food and water are available in abundance for all to enjoy, and nearly all hands-on work such as cleaning, maintenance, cooking, are taken care of by their robotic slaves, servants, the synths. All of this is provided to encourage their society of scientists and scholars to pursue their research and experiments. The one complaint that someone could have about the Institute is that they're a workaholic society. They do have downtime in the evenings, but nearly all aspects of their lives are spent in the lab. But that being said, the scientists love what they do. For them, this is a perk rather than a con. However, there are some slight downsides. Hierarchically, the Institute is divided into 4 branches, with the respective director representing them. The 4 heads of these branches report directly to the director, who oversees the direction, endeavours, and policy of the Institute itself. And although the director is a nominally elected position, the role itself is one largely autocratic. An individual director can impose his or her will on any Institute member, with little recourse given. The Institute fundamentally has the highest standard of living out of all the factions. Their quality of life is unmatched amongst other factions, groups, or societies in the known world. Members of the Institute are the brightest minds of the post-war world, and are granted immense boons due to this. However, these perks have somewhat sullied the Institute's perception on humanity, or at least humans of the world above. The majority of the Institute members look at Wastelanders with disdain, some claiming that they're the last remnants of a dying past, and Father, who states that
the Commonwealth is dead. There's no future here. The only hope for humanity lies below.
The last of the Wasteland factions we look at is probably one of the most brutal. Caesar's Legion is one of the major factions of the Wasteland, and appears in Fallout New Vegas. Out of the brutal regions of the East, Caesar forged an empire out of formal tribals that was built on conquest and war. Caesar ultimately plans to use the military might of these tribals to conquer the NCR, and use that same military to amalgamate it into a new society. But what is life and living standards like within the Legion itself? Well, it can differ from who you look at. Although never seen in-game, New Vegas developers indicated that additional Legion locations had been planned to showcase more civilian outposts within the Legion, who were classified not as citizens but as non-tribal people who live under Legion control. As stated by Joshua Sawyer, the majority of these citizens in Legion lands enjoy safe and productive lives, but have no freedoms, rights, or say in what happens in their community. They get water, power, and food consistently, the travel is safe, and occasionally someone might step afoul of a legionary and they get their head cut off. Although these Legion settlers or civilians, however we want to claim them, are technically not slaves, the same cannot be said for the legionaries that make up Caesar's armies. The legionaries of Caesar's Legion revere the man as a living deity, and espouse the Legion as akin to civilization reborn. The majority are formed from conquered tribal people and descendants of these tribes, and while some of them may privately lament their current fate or loss of their identity, the majority are very thankful to be admitted into the Legion. For example, Lucius rejects the idea he'd have any ill will to the Legion for destroying his tribe, stating that before they were savages, and the Legion raised them up and made them better than they were. Lucius is obviously evidently pro-Legion, which makes sense given he could be considered the number 2 man in the Legion itself. But it's important to note that living standards still remain fairly terrible, no matter how high a soldier rises up. Yes, a recruit legionary is probably more likely to die in battle given their lack of experience, equipment and training. No matter how high a soldier rises, he still remains a slave. To quote Joshua Sawyer again, soldiers in Caesar's Legion don't have personal freedoms. They get to fight and die for Caesar. It's not a volunteer military, though many of the legionaries are born and raised into it, so they're effectively brainwashed. Even high-ranking officers are not afforded any true sense of reward. Yes, they receive better equipment, their own soldiers to command and slaves of their own, but their lives still belong to a dictator. As stated by Josh Sawyer again, legionaries under Caesar are not like Roman patrician officers. They're not part of a larger society that celebrates and rewards military service with things like conference of honorific titles, triumphs, etc. All legionaries are slave soldiers, period. Essentially, living standards within the Legion military do get better the further up you move. You will be further away from the front lines and given better equipment to survive if you do have to fight. But no matter how high you rise, legum servissimus, you are a slave to the law, and Caesar's laws are absolute. And no matter who you are, if you're found to be in breach of these, your head would probably be separated from your body. In conclusion, the best standard of living could obviously be seen within the Institute. The scientists within those labs probably have better quality of lives than those of us watching this video itself. However, the Institute is made up of underneath 100 people total, so it depends on if we measure the best standard of living on the basis of the number of people who have better lives in the faction, or the quality of life in the faction itself. And if we're going off a numerical basis, then this would have to be the NCR. Despite the more terrible frontier regions of it, the NCR provides an immensely high standard of living to at least half its population of 1 million people. True, it's no space-age science apartments, but it could be considered the best post-war society. But let me know what you think. Are there any other post-war societies who have a high standard of living than the ones mentioned in this video? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.